The screams echoed through the courtyard of the Lagos apartment complex before anyone saw what happened. Adanna Okafor stumbled out of apartment 4B, her wrapper barely clinging to her trembling body, her left arm and shoulder glistening with angry red bands. Her husband, Chukwudi, stood in the doorway behind her, a steel kettle still gripped in his shaking hand, steam rising like guilt into the humid morning air. "You see what you made me do?" he shouted, his voice cracking with rage and something else, fear, perhaps. "You think you can disrespect me in my own house?" Neighbors poured from their apartments. Mrs. Ngozi from 3A gasped and covered her mouth. Alhaji Musa dropped his briefcase and rushed forward. Within seconds, the courtyard filled with onlookers, their smartphones already recording, capturing Adanna's agony and Chukwudi's defense in real time. "She provoked me," Chukwudi continued, jabbing his finger at his wife. "All of you know how women can push a man. I provide everything, and this is how she repays me." But Adanna wasn't cowering. Despite the pain radiating through her body, despite the burns that would scar her skin forever, she stood tall. Her eyes, wet with tears that refused to fall, locked onto her husband with an intensity that made several people step back. "Tell them," she said, her voice eerily calm. "Tell them what I did that was so disrespectful. You questioned me. You went through my phone like I'm some criminal. I asked you about the N2.5 million missing from our joint account." Her words cut through the morning like a blade. "The money we saved for our daughter Karameka's university fees. The money that disappeared 3 days ago." The crowd shifted. Mamas rippled through the gathering. Money and marriage, two topics that could turn any Lagos neighborhood into a courthouse. Chukwudi's face darkened. "That money is my business. I'm the man of this house." "That money," Adanna continued, her voice growing stronger even as her body trembled, "went to your second wife in Abuja. Blessing Adeyemi. The woman you married 6 months ago without telling me. The woman carrying your child." The courtyard erupted. Phones angled for better footage. Someone called for an ambulance. Mrs. Ngozi cursed under her breath in Igbo. But Adanna wasn't finished. She reached into her wrapper with her uninjured hand and pulled out her own phone. With deliberate movements, she unlocked it and held it up. "I have the bank transfers. I have the wedding photos someone sent me anonymously last week. I have WhatsApp messages where he called me the old wife and promised Blessing a life I could never imagine." Chukwudi lunged forward, but Alhaji Musa and 2 other men grabbed him. "You want to humiliate me," he spat. "You have no idea what I can do to you. Your past, you think these people would look at you the same if they knew." "Then tell them," Adanna interrupted, her voice like steel wrapped in silk. "Tell them about my past, Chukwudi. Tell them everything." The challenge hung in the air. For a moment, her husband seemed to grow larger with the power of secrets held. His lips curled into a cruel smile. "Fine. You want me to tell them? You're perfect, Adanna, this woman you all pity, she's not who you think she is. Before I met her, before I gave her my name and made her respectable, she was. I was a sex worker," Adanna said, cutting him off, her voice carrying across the silent courtyard. "For 3 years, in Kaduna, when I was 19 to 22 years old. After my parents died and my uncle threw me out with nothing. Before I put myself through nursing school. Before I became head nurse at Legon Hospital. Before I met this man and believed in second chances." The silence was absolute. Even the Lagos traffic seemed to quiet. Adanna looked around at her neighbors, at Mrs. Ngozi's shocked face, at Alhaji Musa's dropped jaw, at the young mothers covering their children's ears though they understood nothing. "But here's what you don't know," she continued, turning back to her husband. 3 days ago, when I confronted you about the money, you said you'd destroy me if I didn't stay silent. You said you'd tell everyone my secret and make sure I lost everything, my job, my daughter's respect, my place in this community. She held up her burned arm, wincing but unbowed. So you poured boiling water on me because I wouldn't be blackmailed? Because I said I'd rather lose everything than live one more day under your control. Adanna stepped forward, and the crowd parted like water. Call the police. I'm pressing charges. And after that, I'm going to tell my story, the whole story, to every news station, every blog, every person who will listen. Not because I'm proud of my past, but because I'm tired of being ashamed of surviving. She began walking toward the complex gate, toward the ambulance sirens growing louder in the distance. Behind her, Chukwudi's voice rose in panic. You can't do this. Think about Kayamika. Think about your reputation. Nobody will believe you. They'll tear you apart. Adanna stopped and turned back one last time. Then let them, she said simply. I've been torn apart before. I rebuilt myself once. I can do it again. As she walked away, her phone was already ringing. News traveled fast in Lagos, but social media traveled faster. By the time she reached the gate, the video was viral. Hashtags were forming. The world was watching. And Chukwudi Okofor was about to discover that in the age of social media, the truth and public opinion could be more devastating than any secret. But what Adanna didn't know, what none of them could have predicted, was that her confession would reach someone from her past, someone who knew a very different version of her story. And that person was already booking a flight to Lagos. What do you think happens next? Will Adanna's courage be rewarded or punished? Comment below. The video had been viewed 3.7 million times in 18 hours. Adanna lay in her hospital bed at Legon Hospital, ironically, the same hospital where she'd worked for 8 years, watching her life dissect itself across Nigerian Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Her left arm was wrapped in white gauze, secured with bandages that reminded her with every movement of what her husband had done. What she had endured. What she had survived. Again. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages of support poured in, yes, but so did the others. The judgments. The condemnations. The people who saw her past and decided it erased everything she'd become. Once a prostitute, always a prostitute. She probably deserved it. These women with questionable past. My brother was right not to marry damaged goods. Now everyone sees why. But also, you are brave, sister. You are a warrior. I was assaulted by my husband too. You gave me courage to speak. Your past doesn't define you. Your strength does. Adanna didn't know which messages hurt more. Her daughter, Kayamika, sat in the corner of the private room, her university textbooks unopened on her lap. At 19, she looked younger, her face puffy from crying, her traditional braids pulled back in a hasty ponytail. She hadn't spoken much since arriving from the University of Lagos campus, where her own phone had exploded with messages from classmates who'd seen the video. Mama, she finally said, her voice small. Is it true? All of it. Adanna closed her eyes. This was the conversation she dreaded for 19 years, the truth she'd planned to take to her grave. Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have understood at 10? At 15? Adanna's voice was gentle but firm. I wanted to wait until you were older, until you knew me well enough to see the whole person, not just the past. Kayamika stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the linoleum. Everyone at school is talking about it. They are saying my mother was they are saying horrible things. How am I supposed to face them? With your head up, Adanna said quietly. The way I'm facing them. It's not the same. You chose that life. The words landed like a slap. Adanna felt them settle in her chest, heavy and familiar. Shame was an old companion, it knew exactly where to strike. You're right, she said finally. I chose survival when I had no other choices. I chose to eat instead of starve. I chose life, even when it was ugly, even when it cost me everything I thought I knew about myself. Before Kayameka could respond, the door burst open. Dr. Emeka Adewale, the hospital's chief medical officer, strode in with purposeful steps. His expression was neutral, professional, but Adanna had worked with him long enough to recognize the tension in his jaw. Mrs. Okafor, he began, then corrected himself. Adanna. We need to talk. Kayameka looked between them. I'll wait outside. No, Adanna said firmly. Stay. Whatever he has to say, you should hear it. Dr. Adewale shifted uncomfortably. The hospital board had an emergency meeting this morning. In light of recent developments and the media attention surrounding your case, they've decided it's best if you take an indefinite leave of absence. You're firing her. Kayameka's voice rose in disbelief. Not firing. Leave of absence. With pay, initially, while we assess. Assess what? Adanna interrupted, her voice dangerously calm. Whether a woman who survived sexual exploitation 20 years ago can still draw blood and administer medication. Whether my past as a teenager in crisis affects my ability to manage a nursing staff of 40 professionals. You know it's not that simple. We have donors, board members with traditional values, patients who've called complaining. Patients I've saved, Adanna said. I've been head nurse for 4 years. I've won awards. I implemented the maternal health program that reduced our infant mortality rate by 30%. But now, because everyone knows I survived something terrible, I'm suddenly incompetent. Dr. Adewale sighed. It's politics, Adanna. The chairman's wife saw the video. She's threatening to withdraw their family's foundation funding if we don't take action. That's 12 million naira annually. So I'm worth less than 12 million naira. That's not, he stopped, recognizing the trap. I tried to fight for you. I told them your personal history is irrelevant to your professional excellence. But I was outvoted. After he left, Adanna stared at the ceiling, counting the water stains she'd never noticed before despite working here for nearly a decade. Funny how perspective changed everything. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her accept the call. Adanna Okafor. A woman's voice, unfamiliar, crisp with Lagos elite pronunciation. Speaking. My name is Folese Banko. I'm a lawyer specializing in domestic violence and employment discrimination. I saw your video. I'd like to represent you. Pro bono. Adanna sat up, ignoring the pain in her arm. Why? Because 12 years ago, my sister was murdered by her husband. She'd been planning to leave him, to expose his abuse, but she waited too long. She was ashamed, you see. Afraid of judgment. Afraid people would ask what she did to provoke him. A pause. You're not afraid anymore. That makes you dangerous to men like your husband. And I'd very much like to help you become even more dangerous. Before Adanna could respond, her phone pinged with another notification. This one made her blood freeze. It was a message from an unknown sender, but the attached photo was clear. Chokudi, her husband, walking free on the streets of Lagos, smiling at his phone. The caption read, "Charges dropped due to insufficient evidence. Bailed out by his family this morning. Says his wife is a liar and a whore. Press conference scheduled for 6 p.m. Kayameka saw her mother's face change. What is it? Adanna handed her the phone. As her daughter read, her expression shifted from confusion to fury. He's free. After what he did to you? His family has money, Adanna said flatly. His uncle is Senator Okafor from Enugu. They have connections. Folese's voice crackled through the phone, still connected. I see it too. It's already on the blogs. But Adanna, this might be the best thing that could have happened. How is this? Because now he'll talk. He'll defend himself publicly, dig himself deeper. Men like him always do. And when he does, when he reveals his character to the world, we'll have everything we need. Not just for the assault case, but for divorce, custody, and my specialty, turning public opinion into legal leverage. Adanna looked at her daughter, at the hospital room that represented a career potentially lost, at her bandaged arm that would scar her forever. What do I need to do? Tell your story. The real story. All of it. Before the press conference. We control the narrative, or he does. Your choice. After the call ended, Adanna opened her laptop. Her hands hovered over the keyboard. Behind her, Kayamika spoke softly. Mama. If you do this, if you tell everything, it won't just be Lagos watching. It will be Nigeria. Maybe more. I know. They'll judge you. They'll say terrible things. They already are. But if you don't. Kayamika trailed off, then began again. When those girls were talking about you at school, calling you names, my roommate, Zainab, she stood up. She said her aunt was trafficked when she was young, that survival isn't shame, that we should thank God we've never had to make such choices. She made them stop. Her voice broke. I was too scared to defend my own mother. But she did. Adanna turned to look at her daughter. I'm sorry, Mama. I was thinking about myself, about my embarrassment. But you're the one who's hurt. You're the one who's been brave. I want to be brave too. Then sit with me, Adanna said, opening a blank document. Help me tell the truth. As mother and daughter began to type, neither of them noticed the black car that had been parked outside the hospital for the past hour. Inside, a woman in her 40s watched the hospital entrance through tinted windows, her phone showing the same viral video everyone in Lagos had seen. But unlike everyone else, Yeton Adelik wasn't watching Adanna's burns or Chukwudi's rage. She was watching Adanna's face, comparing it to a memory 20 years old. Because Yeton knew exactly who Adanna had been in Kaduna. She'd been there. They'd survived together. And the story Adanna was about to tell the world. It was missing something crucial. Something that would change everything. Something that involved Yeton's missing sister, and a crime no one had ever solved. Would the truth set Adanna free, or destroy her? Comment your predictions. At 4:47 p.m., Adanna pressed to publish on the blog post that would redefine her life. The post was titled simply, I am Adanna Okafor. This is my story. Within 13 minutes, it had 100,000 views. By the time Chukwudi's press conference began at 6 p.m., it had reached 2.3 million. Adanna had written everything. Not just the facts, but the feelings. Not just the survival, but the shame that had followed her like a shadow for 2 decades. She wrote about her parents, both teachers, dying in a car accident when she was 17. About her uncle who'd taken her in, then propositioned her 6 months later. About running away with nothing but a backpack and 4,000 Nigerian nairas. She wrote about Kaduna, about the auntie who'd found her sleeping in a market stall and offered help that came with conditions. About the 3 years of hotels and strangers and learning to leave her body while it was being used. About saving every naira she could hide from her madam. She wrote about nursing school, about studying textbooks between clients, about taking her WAC exams with bruises hidden under long sleeves. About the day she earned enough to live, to start over, to become someone new. She wrote about meeting Chukwudi at a church event, about believing God had rewarded her survival with love. About never telling him the truth until after they were married, when she was pregnant, when she thought she was safe. She wrote about his initial shock, then acceptance, then the slow weaponizing of her past. Every argument ending with, remember what you were. Every disagreement silenced with, who else would want you? Every year, the shame tightening like chains she'd helped forge. And she wrote about the burns on her arm, about the boiling water, about the moment she decided she'd rather be destroyed honestly than survive dishonestly. The post went viral faster than the original video. Nigerian Twitter exploded. Hashtag I am Adanna trended globally. Women began sharing their own stories of survival, of abuse, of secrets held at knife point by men who claimed to love them. But the backlash was equally fierce. Religious leaders called her confession inappropriate and glorifying sin. Social media commentators debated whether her past disqualified her from sympathy. Think pieces appeared arguing both sides, why Adanna Okafor deserves our support versus the dangers of normalizing prostitution. Kayamika sat beside her mother in the hospital room, reading comments aloud, both kinds, so Adanna wouldn't face them alone. Listen to this one, Mama, I was trafficked at 15. For 7 years, I thought I was dirty, broken, worthless. Today, I told my husband my secret because of you. He held me and said my past made me stronger, not weaker. Thank you for your courage. Adanna closed her eyes, letting the words settle. Now this woman is trying to make prostitution acceptable. Our daughters will think this behavior is fine. She should be ashamed, not celebrated. Read the good ones twice, Adanna said softly. That's how we survive this. At exactly 6 p.m., they turned on the television. Channels TV was broadcasting Chukwudi's press conference live. He sat behind a table at the Okafor family compound in Ikoyi, flanked by his lawyer and his father, Chief Okafor, a retired permanent secretary whose political connections stretched deep into Lagos society. Chukwudi wore a crisp white agbada and an expression of wounded dignity. I want to address the malicious lies being spread about me, he began, his voice steady, practiced. Yes, my wife and I had a domestic disagreement. Yes, there was an accident involving hot water. But she is painting me as a monster to cover her own sins. Accident, Kayamika muttered. He poured it directly on her arm. Chukwudi continued. I married this woman in good faith. I gave her my name, elevated her status, provided a home for her and her daughter. Her daughter. Adanna's voice was ice. He means our daughter. Despite knowing her history. I looked past her shameful past because I believed in forgiveness, in redemption. But now she's using that past, exploiting it, to gain sympathy and destroy my reputation. His lawyer leaned into the microphone. Mr. Okafor is the victim here. He's been defamed online, his character assassinated, his business partnerships threatened, all because he reacted naturally to extreme provocation in his own home. Naturally, Adanna repeated. He scolded me naturally. Chief Okafor spoke next, his voice carrying the authority of decades in Nigerian politics. My son is a good man. A provider. A Christian. This woman has embarrassed our family, exposed our private matters to strangers, and is now trying to profit from victimhood. We will not stand for this. We are pursuing legal action for defamation, and we call on all Nigerians to see through this manipulation. Then Chukwudi played his trump card. Furthermore, he said, pulling out a folder, I have evidence that my wife has been in contact with her former associates. That she may have returned to that life even during our marriage. I have phone records, text messages. Adanna's phone exploded with notifications. Her blog, her social media, her email, all simultaneously bombarded with a new hashtag Adanna. Someone had leaked doctored screenshots showing text conversations that never happened, bank deposits to accounts she'd never heard of, photos of a woman who looked vaguely like her entering a hotel with a man. It's fake, Kayamika breathed. All of it. You can see the editing errors if you look close. But most people wouldn't look close. They'd see the headlines, husband reveals wife's double life. They'd scroll past the fake evidence just fast enough to believe it was real. Adanna's hospital room door burst open. Folisade Banco strode in, her laptop already open, her expression fierce. "Don't panic," she said immediately. "I know it looks bad, but I've already contacted forensic analysts. These images are edited, badly edited, actually. We can prove it. But more importantly," she turned her laptop screen toward them. It showed a wire transfer from Chief Okafor's personal account to a digital media company known for producing fake news and fabricated evidence. "He paid for those doctored screenshots," Folasade said. "500,000 naira, transferred yesterday. And I have the receipts, thanks to a friend at the bank who believes in justice more than privacy laws." "How did you?" "Don't ask questions that'll get me disbarred," Folasade said with a slight smile. "The point is, we can destroy his credibility. But we need to move fast, before the lies spread faster than we can counter them." Adanna's phone rang. "The hospital administrator." She answered on speaker. "Mrs. Okafor, given the new allegations and the media attention, the board has decided to terminate your employment effective immediately. Someone will pack your office belongings." "Don't bother," Adanna said calmly. "I quit. You'll have my formal resignation by morning, along with a detailed account of every labor law violation you've committed in the past 5 years. I kept excellent records." She hung up before he could respond. Kayamika stared at her mother. "Mama, that was your career." "That was a job that didn't deserve me," Adanna corrected. "I'll find another. But first, we fight." Folasade nodded approvingly. "That's the spirit. Now, here's what we do next, we sue. Not just for assault and defamation, but for fraud. Those fake images. That's falsification of evidence." His lawyer knew they were fake when he presented them. "That's grounds for disbarment and criminal charges." "It'll take months," Adanna said. "Maybe years." "True. But you know what happens in the meantime." Folasade leaned forward. "You become a symbol. The woman who refused to be silenced. We do interviews, panel discussions, advocacy work. We turn you into someone no one can ignore or dismiss. By the time we get to court, public opinion will be so firmly on your side that no judge will dare rule against you. And if public opinion turns against me again, then we remind them why they supported you in the first place. We tell more stories. We find other women Chukwudi abused, and trust me, there are always others. We make his name synonymous with everything people hate about domestic violence." Adanna looked at her daughter. "Kayamika, this means more publicity. More judgment. More strangers discussing our lives." "Then let them discuss," Kayamika said, her voice stronger now. "But they'll discuss the truth." That night, after Folasade left and Kayamika dozed in the corner chair, Adanna's phone buzzed with a private message on Instagram. The profile photo was blank. The name was just initials, YA. The message read, "Adanna. It's your turn. From Kaduna. We need to talk about what really happened. About Bisola. About why you left. You don't know the whole story. And it's about to come out." Adanna's hands went numb. Bisola. She hadn't heard that name in 19 years. Bisola, her best friend during those 3 dark years. Bisola, who disappeared one night without warning. Bisola, who Adanna had assumed had escaped, started over somewhere new. But Yutan's message suggested something else entirely. Something Adanna had never known. Something that, if revealed now, could destroy everything she'd built, not because it would prove she was lying, but because it would prove she'd left out the worst part of her story. The part where someone had died. The coffee shop in Lekki Phase 1 was deliberately public, glass walls, afternoon crowds, witnesses everywhere. Adanna had chosen it precisely because it felt safe, though she suspected no amount of witnesses could protect her from the conversation she was about to have. Yotan Adelik sat across from her, older but unmistakable. The same sharp cheekbones, the same watchful eyes that had helped both of them survive Kaduna 20 years ago. But now those eyes were harder, carrying grief that time had calcified into something permanent. "You look good," Yotan said, stirring her cappuccino without drinking it. "Respected. Clean. Like none of it ever happened." Adanna's bandaged arm rested on the table between them, proof that it had all happened, that it was still happening, that the past never truly stayed buried. "I rebuilt myself," Adanna said quietly. "The same way you must have." "Did I?" Yotan's laugh was bitter. "I manage an import business. I'm married to a man who thinks I spent those years at university in Ghana. I have 3 children who believe their mother's biggest scandal is being a terrible cook. So yes, I rebuilt. On lies. Just like you." "Why are you here?" you turned. "Because of Bisola." The name hung between them like accusation. "I thought she got away," Adanna whispered. "After that night, when she disappeared, I assumed." "You assumed wrong." Yotan pulled out her phone and slid it across the table. The screen showed a newspaper article from 2004, yellowed with age but digitized now, "Unidentified woman's body found in Kaduna River. Police suspect foul play." Adanna's vision blurred. The coffee shop noise faded to static. "They found her 3 weeks after you left," Yotan continued. "Beaten. Strangled. Dumped like garbage. It took 6 months to identify her body because no one reported her missing. No family. No friends. Just us, and we were gone. Who killed her? Who do you think?" Yotan's voice cracked. "It was one of Madam Khadija's clients. A politician whose name you definitely know but I won't say in public. Bisola tried to blackmail him, said she'd expose his family values campaign as hypocrisy if he didn't help her escape. You remember how determined she was to get out?" Adanna remembered. Bisola had been planning, saving, scheming. She'd wanted to go to school too, to become a teacher like her late mother. She talked about it constantly, late at night when the 3 of them, Adanna, Yotan, Bisola, would huddle in the room they shared and dream of freedom. "The night she disappeared," Yotan said, "was the same night you left. I always wondered if you knew something. If you'd run because you knew what was going to happen." "I knew nothing," Adanna insisted, her voice rising enough that nearby tables glanced over. She lowered it again. "I left because I'd finally saved enough. I left because I couldn't survive one more day. I left because you were thinking of yourself." The words landed like fists. "Yes," Adanna admitted. "I was thinking of myself. I was 19 years old and I wanted to live. I'm sorry I didn't save her. I'm sorry I didn't save you. I'm sorry I saved only myself." Yotan's expression softened slightly, though the anger remained. "I'm not here to punish you, Adanna. I'm here to warn you. Because the man who killed Bisola, he's still powerful. Still connected. And your story, your viral confession, has people asking questions about Kaduna in the early 2000s. Questions about Madam Khadija's operation, about the men who used us, about what happened to the girls who disappeared. Let them ask," Adanna said. "I'm done hiding." "Are you?" Yotan leaned forward. "Because I got a call yesterday. From someone claiming to be a journalist. He was asking about you specifically, about your time in Kaduna, about any friends you had, any incidents, any suspicious deaths. He had Bisola's name, Adanna. He had her photograph. How is that possible? The police never. Someone's feeding him information. Someone who knows the truth and wants to use it. My guess. Your husband's family. Chief Okafor has political connections that stretch all the way to Kaduna. If he's digging into your past, really digging, he'll find Bisola. And when he does, he'll twist it. He'll suggest you were somehow involved in her death. That you ran because you were guilty, not because you were surviving. Adanna felt the walls closing in. I had nothing to do with. I know that. But truth doesn't matter when powerful people decide on a narrative. They'll say you and Bisola had a fight over money, over a client, over anything. They'll say you were there when she died. They'll say you helped cover it up. But you know that's not true. You can testify. Your tongue laughed, sharp and humorless. Testify. And destroy my own life in the process. Tell my husband, my children, my church, my business partners that I was there too. That I'm just like you. She shook her head. I'm sorry, Adanna. I'm truly sorry. But I have my own survival to consider. Then why tell me at all? Because unlike you, I'm still a coward. Your tongue stood, gathering her handbag. I came to give you a choice. The journalist's name is Topchukwu Nwosu. He works for the Lagos Chronicle. He's planning to publish his story in 3 days, whether you talk to him or not. If you get ahead of it, tell the full truth including Bisola, maybe you can control the damage. If you don't. He shrugged. Well. You've seen how fast public opinion can turn. After Yeton left, Adanna sat alone at the table, her coffee cold, her mind racing. 3 days. She had 3 days to decide whether to expose another layer of pain, another chapter of victimhood, another reason for people to judge her. Her phone rang. Foley said. We have a problem, the lawyer said without preamble. Chukwudi's legal team just filed a counterclaim. They are suing you for defamation, alienation of affection with his family, and, this is the creative part, theft of marital assets. They are claiming you emptied the joint account yourself and are framing him. That's absurd. The bank records are being reviewed by a bank manager who plays golf with Chief Okafor. Suddenly the evidence isn't as clear as we thought. Suddenly there are discrepancies that need investigation. Adanna closed her eyes. They are buying their way out. They are trying. But here's the thing, I found something else. Your husband's second wife in Abuja. Blessing Adeyemi. She's 16. The word tilted. What? 16 years old. Still in secondary school. Her family claims she's 18, but I found her birth certificate. Chief Okafor arranged the marriage through a traditional backdoor ceremony, no official documentation. He knew her real age. Your husband knew her real age. That's statutory rape. That's child marriage, coercion, and potential trafficking charges. That's the kind of crime that can't be buried by political connections because child rights organizations will go to war over it. Foley said's voice held grim satisfaction. This changes everything. We are not just fighting a domestic violence case anymore. We are exposing a family that systematically preys on vulnerable girls. For the first time since the boiling water, Adanna felt something like hope. But it was complicated by the new weight of Bisola's story, of Yeton's warning, of the journalist who would either save or destroy her in 72 hours. That evening, Kayamika found her mother staring at an old photograph, one of the few possessions Adanna had kept from Kaduna. 3 girls, barely women, arms around each other, smiling despite everything. Adanna, Yeton, and Bisola. Who are they? Kayamika asked softly. Adanna traced Bisola's face with her finger. The girl had been 21 in this photo, her smile bright despite the darkness they all lived in. My friends. From before. Where are they now? One rebuilt her life in silence. The other. Adanna's voice broke. The other didn't make it out. She told Kayamika everything then. About Bisola's murder, about the politician who'd killed her, about Yeton's warning, about the journalist who was about to expose a death Adanna hadn't caused but might be blamed for anyway. What are you going to do? Kayamika asked when the story was finished. I don't know. If I tell the truth about Bisola, people will say I'm just revealing another scandal for attention. If I stay silent, they'll say I'm hiding my involvement in her death. Either way, I lose. Kayamaka picked up the photograph, studying the three young women frozen in time. Or maybe you honor her. Maybe you tell her story not because you have to, but because she deserves to be remembered as more than a murdered sex worker. Maybe you give her the dignity no one gave her when she was alive. Adanna looked at her daughter with new eyes. When had this girl become so wise? The journalist, Kayamaka, continued. What if you talk to him on your terms? What if you tell him everything, but you make sure Bisola is the hero of her own story, not just a victim? Before Adanna could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mrs. Okafor, this is Topchukwu Nwosu from the Lagos Chronicle. I'm investigating your time in Kaduna, specifically the death of Bisola Adelik in 2004. I have evidence suggesting you may have witnessed or have knowledge of her murder. I'd like to interview you before I publish. For fairness. You have 48 hours. Attached was a photo, Bisola's body being pulled from the river, grainy and horrific. Adanna's hands shook. This was the image that would accompany his story. This was how the world would meet Bisola, not as a dreamer, a survivor, a friend, but as a corpse. She made her decision. Call Folesaid, she told Kayamaka. Tell her I want to do a live interview. Not with this journalist, with someone bigger. International if possible. I want to tell Bisola's story the right way, and I want to announce what Chukwudi did to that 16-year-old girl. We do both stories at once, before anyone can separate them or twist them. Kayamaka died. While they waited for Folesaid to answer, Adanna opened her laptop and began typing another blog post. This one was titled, For Bisola, the friend I couldn't save. She wrote about their friendship, about Bisola's intelligence and humor, about her plans to become a teacher. She wrote about the system that had trapped them all, about Madam Khadija who'd exploited them, about the politician whose name she didn't know but whose crime she would never forget. She wrote about survivor's guilt, about the shame of escaping when others didn't, about carrying Bisola's memory for 20 years without knowing she'd been murdered. And she wrote an appeal: if you know anything about Bisola Adelik's death in Kaduna in 2004, please come forward. If you were there, if you survived, if you escaped, speak. Not for me, but for every girl who didn't make it out. For every girl who's still trapped. For every woman who's been silenced by shame or fear or men who think they're untouchable. She published it at 11:37 p.m. By midnight, it had 500,000 views. By 2 a.m., 3 more women had come forward with their own stories from Madam Khadija's operation. One of them claimed to know the politician's identity. By 4 a.m., the police in Kaduna announced they were reopening Bisola Adelik's cold case. And by 6 a.m., Chief Okafor's house in Ikoyi was surrounded by journalists asking about his son's teenage wife and whether the family had any connection to unsolved murders in Kaduna. Adanna watched the news coverage from her hospital bed, exhausted but strangely calm. The storm was getting worse before it could get better. But at least now, Bisola would be remembered. At least now, the truth was louder than the lies. Her phone rang. Folesaid, her voice crackling with excitement and urgency. CNN International wants you for an interview. Tomorrow morning. They are calling it One Woman's Fight Against Nigeria's Hidden Shame. They want to discuss domestic violence, child marriage, and sex trafficking in one segment. This is huge, Adanna. This is platform you can't buy. What about Chukwudi? Won't he? Chukwudi is in hiding. His lawyer dropped him this morning after the child marriage allegations went public. No one wants to defend him now. Even his father's political allies are distancing themselves. For the first time in weeks, Adanna laughed. It was a tired sound, but genuine. Then I'll do it. Set it up. After she hung up, she looked at Bisola's photograph one more time. "I'm sorry I left you," she whispered to the smiling girl who'd never grown old. "But I promise I'll make sure they remember you fought. That we all fought. That survival isn't shame, it's victory." Outside her window, Lagos was waking up to another humid morning. Somewhere in the city, Chukwudi was realizing his power was evaporating. Somewhere else, Chief Okafor was calling in favors that were no longer being answered. And across Nigeria, women were reading Adanna's words and recognizing their own stories in hers. But in Kaduna, in a small apartment in an unnamed neighborhood, a man watched the news with growing panic. He was older now, grayer, but still powerful, a senator whose face appeared regularly on political programs, whose family values campaign had won him 3 elections. He'd killed Bisola Adelik 20 years ago because she threatened to expose him. Now, thanks to Adanna's confession, the case was being reopened. New technology, DNA evidence, witnesses who'd been too scared to talk before, it was all coming together. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he'd hoped never to use again. "We have a problem," he said when the line connected. "The Okafor woman. She needs to be stopped. Permanently." The voice on the other end was calm, professional, expensive. "That's going to cost you. She's high profile now. Protected. I don't care what it costs. Make her go away before she ruins everything." After the call ended, the senator poured himself whiskey and stared at his reflection in the window. He'd built a career on respectability, on religion, on pretending the past was dead. But the past, it seemed, was very much alive. And it was coming for him. What do you think will happen to Adanna? Will the truth protect her, or put her in more danger? Like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts. The CNN studios in Lagos were pristine, professional, and intimidating. Adanna sat in the makeup chair at 6:30 a.m., watching technicians adjust lights and cameras while her stomach churned with nerves. Her bandaged arm had been carefully arranged to be visible but not overwhelming, a reminder of violence without being exploitative. Kayameka stood nearby, filming everything on her phone for Adanna's growing social media following. In 3 weeks, her mother had gone from anonymous nurse to national symbol. The evolution was dizzying. The interviewer was Zainab Akolai, CNN's West Africa correspondent, a Nigerian woman known for asking hard questions without sensationalism. She'd interviewed presidents and warlords with the same unflinching directness. Now she would interview Adanna. "Ready?" Zainab asked as they took their seats on the interview set. "No," Adanna admitted. "But let's do it anyway." The cameras went live at 7 a.m. Nigerian time, streaming globally. "Today we are speaking with Adanna Okafor," Zainab began, her voice measured and clear, a woman whose story has captured international attention and sparked a national conversation about domestic violence, the exploitation of vulnerable women, and the power of speaking truth to shame. "Mrs. Okafor, thank you for joining us. Thank you for having me. Let's start at the beginning. 3 weeks ago, a video of your husband assaulting you went viral. Walk us through what happened that morning." Adanna took a breath and began. She told the story calmly, methodically, the missing university fees, the confrontation, the boiling water. She described the pain not just physically but emotionally, the humiliation of being wounded in front of neighbors, the terror of not knowing if she'd survive. "And then you did something unexpected," Zainab continued. "When your husband tried to use your past as a sex worker to shame you, you confessed it publicly yourself. Why?" "Because shame only has power when it's a secret," Adanna said, her voice steady despite the cameras, despite knowing millions were watching. "For 20 years, I let my past be a weapon my husband used to control me. Every argument, every disagreement, every moment I tried to assert myself, he'd say, 'Remember what you were.' And I'd go silent. That morning, I realized I'd rather be destroyed by the truth than controlled by the lies I'd been told about myself." "Tell us about that past." How did a woman who's now a respected nurse end up in sex work? Adanna told the story she'd written in her blog post, but with more detail now, more context. She painted the picture of a traumatized teenager with no options, of the so-called help that came with strings attached, of the 3 years she'd spent disconnected from her own body while her mind focused only on escape. You've said you're not ashamed of surviving. But surely there must be complicated feelings about that time. Of course, Adanna admitted. I'm not proud of everything I did to survive. But I refuse to be ashamed of choosing life when death seemed easier. I refuse to apologize for saving myself when no one else would. Zainab nodded, then shifted. Recently, you revealed another part of your story, your friend Bisola Adelik, who was murdered in Kaduna in 2004. Tell us about her. This was harder. Adanna's voice wavered as she described Bisola, her intelligence, her dreams, her determination to escape. She described the night Bisola disappeared, the assumption that she'd found freedom, the devastating truth that came 20 years later. Bisola was killed because she tried to fight back, Adanna said, tears sliding down her face now. She tried to blackmail a powerful man into helping her escape, and he murdered her for it. Her body was found in a river 3 weeks after I left Kaduna. For 20 years, I didn't know. For 20 years, I thought she'd made it out. Do you know who killed her? I know he's a politician. I know he's still in power. I know his name will come out when the investigation is complete. Adanna looked directly at the camera. And I know he's probably watching this right now, thinking he can silence me the way he silenced her. The studio fell quiet. Even the camera operators seemed to hold their breath. Are you afraid? Zainab asked softly. Terrified, Adanna admitted. But fear is familiar. I've been afraid my whole life, afraid of starving, afraid of violence, afraid of judgment, afraid of my past being exposed. I'm tired of being afraid. If they kill me for speaking the truth, at least I'll die as myself. Not as someone else's secret. Not as someone else's shame. Zainab shifted topics. Let's talk about the newest allegations surrounding your husband's family. You've revealed that your husband was in a relationship with a 16-year-old girl. How did you discover this? Adanna described the missing money, the bank transfers, the photographs of a traditional wedding ceremony that was never legally registered. She described learning the girl's true age, realizing that child marriage was being covered up by the same family trying to destroy her credibility. Chief Okafor, your husband's father, is a prominent political figure with significant influence. Were you worried about retaliation when you made these allegations? I stopped worrying about retaliation when my husband poured boiling water on my arm, Adanna said flatly. What more could they do to me that hasn't already been done? They could imprison you with false charges. They could continue destroying your reputation. They could kill me, Adanna finished. Yes. But silence hasn't kept me safe. Compliance hasn't kept me safe. The only thing that's kept me alive this long is the fact that I'm now too visible to disappear quietly. So I keep speaking. I keep telling the truth. And I trust that there are more good people than bad ones, more people who want justice than people who want to preserve corruption. Zainab leaned forward. What do you want people watching this to understand? Adanna thought carefully. I want them to understand that victims are complicated. We are not perfect. We make survival choices that don't fit neat narratives. We are angry and scared and sometimes we are not likable. But we are human, and we deserve safety and dignity and justice, not because we're innocent in some pure way, but because we're human. That should be enough. And what do you say to other women in similar situations, trapped in abusive marriages, held hostage by their past, afraid to speak? I say you're not alone. I say your past doesn't disqualify you from safety. I say there's no perfect time to live, no perfect way to survive, but you deserve to try anyway. Adanna's voice grew stronger. And I say to the people who love them, believe them. Even when their stories are messy. Even when they are not perfect victims. Believe them and help them escape. After the interview ended and the camera stopped recording, Adanna sat in the chair feeling emptied out and strangely lighter. She'd said everything she needed to say. The truth was out there now, unfiltered, unguarded. Zainab approached with her card. That was powerful. Whatever happens next, you did something important today. Whatever happens next, Adanna repeated. The words felt ominous. By noon, the interview had been viewed 12 million times across CNN's platforms. Hashtags proliferated, hashtag I am Adanna, hashtag believe survivors, hashtag justice for Bisola. Nigerian Twitter was a battlefield. Some praised Adanna's courage. Others called her publicity hungry, attention-seeking, a liar who deserved whatever happened to her. Religious leaders debated whether forgiveness required silence. Feminists argued about whether sex work could be freely chosen or was always exploitation. But something else was happening too. Women across Nigeria, across Africa, across the world were sharing their own stories. Domestic violence survivors posted photos of their injuries alongside hashtag I am Adanna. Former sex workers wrote about their paths to survival. Mothers talked about protecting their daughters from predatory men in powerful positions. The conversation was messy and complicated and often ugly, but it was happening. Silence was breaking. Fole said called at 2 p.m. with news. The police in Kaduna have identified a suspect in Bisola's case. Senator Musa Gabra. He's denying everything, of course, but 2 witnesses have come forward, women who were there 20 years ago and are willing to testify now. One of them claims she was in the room when he strangled Bisola. Will he be arrested? His lawyers are fighting it. He has immunity as a sitting senator. But the pressure is building. Human rights organizations are calling for his resignation. Even his own party is distancing themselves. What about Blessing? The 16-year-old. Child Protection Services removed her from Chukwudi's apartment yesterday. She's been placed with a relative who had no idea about the marriage. She's traumatized but safe. And she's willing to testify about how your husband and Chief Okafor arranged everything, how they lied about her age, how they threatened her family. Can they actually prosecute? They'll try. Whether they succeed depends on how much pressure we can maintain. Which is why we need to keep you visible, keep you talking, keep the story in the public eye. Fole said paused. But Adanna, there's something else. I've been receiving threats. Anonymous calls, emails warning me to drop your case. They are subtle, accidents can happen, think about your own family, but they are threats. Adanna's stomach tightened. I'm sorry. If you want to stop. I'm not stopping, Fole said interrupted. But you need to take precautions. Higher security. Vary your routine. Don't go anywhere alone. These people, they are desperate now. Desperate people do dangerous things. That evening, back at the hospital, she was being discharged the next morning. Adanna sat with Kayameka reviewing security options they couldn't afford. Private protection was expensive. Moving to a safe house meant disrupting Kayameka's studies. Staying visible meant staying vulnerable. Maybe I should stop, Adanna said quietly. Maybe I've said enough. Maybe. Maybe nothing, Kayameka interrupted. You think Bisola would want you to stop now? You think all those women sharing their stories want you to go silent? You started something, Mama. You can't stop halfway. I don't want you hurt because of me. I'm already hurt because of him, Kayameka said, gesturing toward the television where Chukwudi's face appeared on yet another news segment. He hurt me by hurting you. By stealing from us. By lying to us for years. The only way to make it mean something is to finish this. Before Adanna could respond, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her accept. The voice was male, digitally distorted, terrifying in its calm. Mrs. Okafor. You've said quite enough. If you value your daughter's safety, you recant everything. Say you lied. Say you exaggerated. Say whatever you need to say to make this stop. Who is this? Someone with more power than you can imagine. Someone who doesn't make threats, I make promises. You have 24 hours to announce publicly that you fabricated your allegations. If you don't, your daughter will pay the price for your pride. The line went dead. Adanna stared at her phone, her hand shaking so violently she nearly dropped it. Kayamika saw her mother's face. What happened? Who was that? Adanna opened her mouth to lie, to protect her daughter with silence. But then she remembered her own words from the interview, silence hasn't kept me safe. She told Kayamika everything. Her daughter's face went pale, but her voice was steady. We call the police. We call for Lesaid. We go public with this threat. And if they follow through, then they prove you were right about everything. About corruption, about powerful men who think they're untouchable, about a system that protects predators. Kayamika gripped her mother's hands. I'm scared, Mama. I'm terrified. But I'd rather be scared and fighting than safe and silent. Because silence is what let them hurt you for years. Silence is what got Bisola killed. Silence is what keeps this cycle going. Adanna pulled her daughter close, both of them trembling, both of them terrified, both of them choosing courage anyway. She posted about the threat on social media at midnight. The post went viral immediately. Within hours, human rights organizations were calling for police protection. International news outlets were covering the death threat. Security experts were volunteering their services for free. And somewhere in Nigeria, a man realized that threatening Adanna had been the worst tactical decision of his life. Because now she wasn't just a victim speaking out. She was a symbol of everyone who'd ever been silenced by fear. And symbols, once created, were very difficult to destroy. The safe house in Suralia was modest but secure, metal doors, bad windows, a security guard provided by the Nigerian Bar Association's Human Rights Committee. Adanna and Kayamika had been there for 5 days, surrounded by people determined to keep them alive long enough for justice to happen. If justice was coming at all. Outside, Nigeria waited. The death threat had galvanized public opinion in ways even the viral video hadn't. Politicians who'd been silent suddenly found their voices. Religious leaders who'd condemned Adanna now condemned her attackers. Even Chief Okafor's political party issued a statement, deeply concerned about allegations of violence against witnesses. Senator Musa Gabra had resigned. The police commissioner in Kaduna announced they had enough evidence to charge him with Bisola Adolik's murder. His lawyers promised a lengthy fight, but his political career was over. Chukwudi was in police custody, charged with assault, fraud, and child endangerment. His father, Chief Okafor, was under investigation for conspiracy to commit child marriage and obstruction of justice. The family empire was crumbling, their connections suddenly insufficient against the weight of public fury. But Adanna took no joy in their downfall. She was too exhausted, too scared, too aware that powerful men rarely accepted defeat gracefully. On the 6th day, Folisade arrived with news and a guest. There's someone here to see you, she said. Someone who might change everything. The woman who entered was young, mid-20s, dressed in a simple Ankara blouse and jeans. Her hands twisted nervously around the strap of her purse. My name is Zainab Adeyemi, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I was Chukwudi's first wife. The room fell silent. Chukwudi was married before? Kayamika asked. For 2 years. From 2008 to 2010. I was 21 when we met, 23 when I finally escaped. Zainab sat down, her story spilling out like water through a broken dam. He was charming at first. Generous. Kind. But after the wedding, he changed. Or maybe he just stopped pretending. The physical abuse started small: slaps, pushes, accidents. Then it got worse. She described a marriage identical to Adanna's, complete with financial control, emotional manipulation, and violence that escalated over time. He tried to throw acid in my face during our last fight, she said, her voice steady despite the horror of the memory. I blocked it with my arm. The scars are still there. She rolled up her sleeve. The skin was mottled, shiny with old burn tissue, damage similar to Adanna's but older, healed poorly. Why didn't you report it? Adanna asked gently. I did. I went to the police. But Chief Okafor paid them off. The report disappeared. Then Chief Okafor paid my own family. He gave my father money to convince me to stay quiet, to accept a divorce and move on. My father, who was supposed to protect me, sold my silence for N500,000. Zainab's voice broke. I took the divorce because I wanted to survive. I stayed quiet because I thought it was my only option. Why are you here now? Because when I saw your video, when I saw what he did to you, I realized I could have stopped this. If I'd fought harder, if I'd refused to be silenced, maybe you wouldn't have been hurt. Maybe that 16-year-old girl wouldn't have been trafficked. She looked directly at Adanna. I'm here to testify. Against Chokudi, against his father, against everyone who protected him. I have medical records, photos I hid, text messages I saved. Everything I couldn't use before because I was alone and afraid. But I'm not alone anymore. Folisaid was already pulling out her recorder, her legal pad. This is incredible. With your testimony plus Adanna's plus blessings, we have a pattern of behavior. Not just isolated incidents but systematic abuse enabled by family power and money. There's more, Zainab said. I know about 2 other women. One in Port Harcourt, one in Abuja. Both had relationships with Chokudi that ended with restraining orders. Both were paid off by his family. I've been in contact with them since your story went viral. They want to come forward too. For women, Folisaid breathed. For women willing to testify to a pattern of domestic violence spanning 15 years. No judge can ignore that. No amount of money can buy that away. That evening, CNN ran a follow-up segment. Multiple women accused Lagos business family of systematic abuse. Zainab appeared alongside Adanna, telling her story with the same raw honesty. The other 2 women appeared in silhouette, their identities protected, but their accounts devastating. The backlash against the Okafor family intensified. Business partners cut ties. Political allies issued statements condemning them. Banks froze accounts pending investigation. The Nigerian Senate announced an inquiry into whether Chief Okafor had used his position to obstruct justice. And in Kaduna, police arrested Senator Musa Gobra. The arrest was captured on video, news cameras filming as the senator, who'd spent 20 years walking free after murdering a young woman, was finally led away in handcuffs. He looked smaller somehow, less powerful, just an aging man facing consequences he thought money and influence could delay forever. Adanna watched the footage with Kayameka and Yotand, who'd come to the safe house after seeing the news. Bisola would have loved this, Yotand said softly, tears streaming down her face. She'd have thrown a party. She'd have demanded dancing, Adanna agreed, remembering her friend's joy, her resilience, her refusal to let darkness extinguish her light completely. I'm sorry I couldn't stand with you publicly, Yotand continued. I'm still not brave enough to expose myself. But I've been working behind the scenes, contacting other women from Madam Khadija's operation, gathering testimony for the investigators. Some of us can't speak out loud, but we can still speak. Everyone contributes what they can, Adanna said, squeezing her old friend's hand. Visibility isn't the only form of bravery. The trial began 6 weeks later. The courthouse in Lagos was surrounded by supporters and protesters, some holding signs declaring "Justice for Adanna," others with placards reading "Respect for family privacy" and "False accusations destroy lives." Inside, the proceedings were swift. Chukwudi's lawyers tried every tactic: character assassination, procedural delays, technicalities, but they couldn't overcome the weight of evidence. 4 women testified to abuse. Medical records confirmed injuries. Bank records proved fraud. Blessing, the 16-year-old, described in heartbreaking detail how she'd been manipulated into a marriage she didn't understand, how she'd been threatened when she tried to leave. The judge, a stern woman named Justice Amina Bello, showed no patience for deflection. "This court has had extensive testimony," she said during closing arguments, about a pattern of violence enabled by wealth and influence. "We've heard how vulnerable women, some trafficked, some exploited, some simply trusting the wrong man, were systematically abused and then silenced through intimidation, bribery, and social pressure. This case is not merely about one incident of domestic violence. It's about a system that protects abusers when they have the right connections." She sentenced Chukwudi to 12 years imprisonment for assault, fraud, and child endangerment. Chief Okafor received 8 years for conspiracy and obstruction. Their appeals would take years, but for now, they would serve time. In Kaduna, Senator Gabriel was convicted of Bisola Adolik's murder. Life imprisonment. No possibility of parole. The verdicts made international news. Nigeria's #MeToo moment, headlines declared. One woman's courage changes everything. But for Adanna, the victory felt complicated. She'd won justice, yes, but at what cost? Her career was gone, her reputation permanently marked by scandal, her daughter's education disrupted, her safety forever compromised by having made powerful enemies. Was it worth it? She asked Foley said one evening, after the media frenzy had finally begun to die down. "You're alive," Foley said simply. "You're free. Your daughter knows you fought for her. For other women have justice because you spoke first. A murdered woman's name has been cleared. A corrupt politician is in prison. Was it worth it?" "I don't know," Adanna admitted. "But I think I'd do it again anyway." 6 months after the trial, Adanna started a new job, not at a hospital, but at a non-profit organization providing support services to survivors of domestic violence and sex trafficking. The pay was less than half what she'd earned as head nurse, but the work felt purposeful in ways medicine never had. Kayamaka returned to university, studying social work now instead of accounting. "I want to help people the way Momo's friends helped her," she explained. Zainab opened a shelter for women escaping abuse, funded partly by donations from supporters who'd followed the trial and partly by a settlement from Chief Okafor's seized assets. Yoton remained in the shadows, but she sent regular donations and occasionally called with information about other women who needed help but weren't ready to speak publicly. And Bisola Adelik finally had a grave marker, a beautiful headstone in a cemetery in Kaduna, inscribed with words Adanna had chosen. She dreamed of freedom. She fought for escape. She deserved better than what this world gave her. May her memory be a blessing and a call to action. On the first anniversary of the viral video, Adanna was invited to speak at a United Nations forum on gender-based violence. She stood before diplomats and activists and survivors from around the world, her scarred arm visible in her sleeveless dress, a deliberate choice, a refusal to hide. "I want to tell you about shame," she began. "About how we are taught that victimhood is weakness, that survival is sin, that speaking out is selfish. I want to tell you how I believed those lies for 20 years. How they nearly killed me." She told her story one more time, not for publicity now, but for record. For history. So that someday, when another woman stood where she was standing, that woman would know she wasn't alone. The truth, Adanna concluded, is that powerful men rely on our silence. They rely on shame to keep us quiet, fear to keep us compliant, isolation to keep us controllable. But here's what they don't understand: shame only works in darkness. Fear only works in isolation. When we speak, when we connect, when we refuse to be silent, we become something they can't control. We become witnesses. We become evidence. We become the change we needed when we were surviving alone. The speech was carried on news channels across Africa. In Lagos, in Nairobi, in Accra, in Johannesburg, women watched and recognized themselves in Adanna's words. That evening, Adanna video called Kaameka from her hotel room in New York. "How did it go, Mama?" "It went well. I think Bisola would have been proud. I think she is proud. Wherever she is." After they hung up, Adanna sat by the window, looking out at the city lights. She thought about the girl she'd been at 19, terrified, ashamed, certain she'd never be worthy of anything good. She thought about the woman she'd become, scarred, imperfect, but unbroken. She thought about Chukwudi in prison, about Chief Okafor's fallen empire, about Senator Gobra spending the rest of his life behind bars. She thought about justice, about revenge, about whether there was a difference. But mostly, she thought about all the women who'd reached out since the video went viral. The ones who'd left their abusers. The ones who'd reported their assaults. The ones who'd stopped apologizing for surviving. One woman's voice, amplified by courage and carried by connection, had created ripples that became waves that became a tide of change. It wasn't perfect. Systems were still corrupt. Power still protected predators. Justice was still painfully slow. But it was something. It was a beginning. And for a woman who'd spent 20 years believing she deserved nothing, a beginning felt like everything. Adanna picked up her phone and opened her blog one last time. Her final post was simple. "To everyone who shared their story because I shared mine, you are the heroes of this narrative. Your courage, your truth, your refusal to stay silent, that's what changes the world. Not celebrity, not power, not perfection. Just ordinary people choosing to be extraordinarily brave. Thank you for reminding me that survival isn't shame. It's victory. And it's only the beginning. With love and solidarity, Adanna." She posted it, closed her laptop, and slept peacefully for the first time in decades. Outside her window, the world kept turning. But it was turning toward justice, one brave voice at a time. And that, finally, was enough. The end. Thank you for following Adanna's journey. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe to K-Smart's Mythic Tales. Your comments and support help us tell more stories of resilience, courage, and redemption. Where are you watching from? What part of Adanna's story resonated most with you? Tell us in the comments below.